Welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 84, the first full episode of 2022. So you guys should be able to hear that my voice is back to normal. So this is the first full episode of the year, and we're going to kick things off with a bang and start on the High Republic comics. So we're going to do the first volume of the High Republic comics, which is issues 1 to 5. And to clarify, the High Republic is a new era of Star Wars. It wasn't even in Star Wars Legends, and it is set around 200 years before the Skywalker Saga. So the Skywalker Saga starts at... Generally, it's considered it starts with Phantom Menace, which is around 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. So this all starts around 232 years before the Battle of Yavin. Now, any regular listeners will know I've actually done a handful of book reviews on the High Republic books because they're the main things that kind of kicked off the High Republic, but it's a big multimedia project. There's books, there's comics, there's an audio drama, there's now a game that's been announced that's got a little bit of controversy, but I'm not going to go into that. And then there's also probably going to be some other stuff floating around. I would not be surprised if they release a series of some sort, or maybe even a movie in the coming years after they've kind of laid the groundwork for this stuff. And there is the series called The Acolyte, which is meant to be around the tail end of the High Republic era, kind of going into the Skywalker Saga. So we'll kind of see how that all goes into things, but I think that's not due for release until 2023. It might not even be 2024 actually. So we've got a while before we get to those things, but I just want to clarify some of that background information. And so the other book reviews I have done regarding the High Republic was Light of the Jedi, which was March 13th 2021 when I released it, A Test of Courage, which I released August 14th 2021, Into the Dark, October 2nd 2021, The Rising Storm, November 13th, 2021, and then I did Life Day, which was the last one, which had like a smidge of the High Republic in it. I mean, it technically counts because a character called Buriyaga and his master, Nib Assek, were in it as well, but that's a very short, isolated story. But they're the previous things I've released in the High Republic era. If you're listening on YouTube, you can just go to the High Republic playlist and it's got them all in there. And if you're listening on the feed of Comics in Motion, then you'll have to trawl back to the dates that I just mentioned. Or wherever you listen to the podcast app, just type in Star Wars Comics in Canon and then the High Republic. Or even Comics in Motion High Republic, it should all come up there. So a lot of people have asked about sort of reading orders and things of the High Republic because there's so much content that has come out, and then as of recording this, another wave has just come out as well. So just to give a little bit of background information on the High Republic, obviously I've already told you it's 200 years before the Battle of Yavin, but they get released in phases and in waves. So there's going to be 3 phases, and within each phase is 3 waves as far as we can tell. So we've just finished the first phase. I have not yet read the book that's come out, which is called The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. To clarify, I did actually interview Claudia Gray on my Genuine Chit-Chat show. I think I released it on this feed as well. That was of December 2020, so before the High Republic all kicked off and things. So if you want to listen to that, you can check it out on YouTube, or you can just check it out on Genuine Chit-Chat, or this. Just type in Claudia Gray where you're listening, and then Mike Burton or Genuine Chit-Chat, something like that. You'll be able to listen to it there, because she was a delight to speak with. But Fallen Star, I've ordered a copy, but it's a signed copy, so it takes an extra couple of weeks to get here, so I have not yet read The Fallen Star. But the reading order in general, what people recommend, and from what I've consumed all this content, I recommend as well, is that people should probably start by reading The Light of the Jedi, which is an absolutely incredible book by Charles Soule. And then the order from that is then A Test of Courage, which is a junior novel. It's only like 150 odd pages or something. It's really easy to breeze through, and it's a really cool story. And there's a couple of characters that is central to these comics. They're actually in A Test of Courage, but fear not, I will explain things enough so that you can still get the gist, so that you don't have to consume all this other content to enjoy it. But obviously in this show, I specifically give you additional connections to other content, and also give you guys some plot details so that you don't necessarily have to read the comics and that sort of stuff. But it serves as a good refresher if you have, and also if you haven't, then you get a good amount of information about, whatever it is I am tackling for the week. So yeah, I would recommend Light of the Jedi and A Test of Courage. Into the Dark as well. All three of those. Into the Dark is a young adult novel, and that's actually what Claudia Gray wrote, because all of the authors of the High Republic, they've all written bits and pieces here and there of stuff. So they're the things that kind of kick off the first phase's first wave. So there's those three, and then this volume of the High Republic comics. And then there's Phase 1, Wave 2, which is The Rising Storm, Out of the Shadows, and Race to Crashpoint Tower. And then I believe that's Volume 2 of the High Republic comics, which I'll be tackling in a month's time. And those books and things, once again, I've done the reviews for Rising Storm. I haven't yet done Race to Crashpoint Tower or Out of the Shadows, but I am meaning to over the coming weeks. And then the third wave is Fallen Star, Midnight Horizon, and A Mission to Disaster, I think, are the three books. And then that's going to be the third volume of High Republic comics. And I think the first issue of that has only just come out, so... There are some other High Republic content as well. There's like some mini-series and things I've spoken about. There's Trail of Shadows, Monster of Temple Peak. There's Eye of the Storm. I think there's a few more in the making as well. Once those mini-series have finished, I think Monster at Temple Peak, I think that's just finished. I will be tackling them as well. I'm aiming once a month to do a mini-series, which at the moment pretty much all of them are High Republic stuff. There's a Han Solo and Chewbacca one coming out, I think May time, but the final issue of that won't be out till like, September, October time. So it'll be a while before I tackle that one as well. So there's a lot of High Republic stuff, but I want to clarify over the coming months. Each month I'm aiming to do one volume of the Poe Dameron comics, one volume of these High Republic comics, one mini-series of some sort, be it this or potentially some IDW stuff, because those are still canon. They're Star Wars Adventures, and there's a few mini-series in there as well I haven't done, but also the High Republic Adventures comics. So the High Republic Adventures comics are set around the same time, obviously, High Republic, but they are produced by IDW Publishing. So they're still canon, and they're still written by one of the High Republic authors. It is Daniel Jose Older, who writes the High Republic Adventures, and although they're aimed at a slightly younger audience, they are genuinely as good as these comics. I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I started getting into those, but what I'm probably going to do is, next week's probably going to be Poe Dameron, then the week after that, I imagine I'll do High Republic Adventures, the week after that, then a mini-series, and then back to these ones. It'll kind of flit like that, so you guys get a little bit of a break between High Republic comics and stuff. But obviously at the moment there's only 2 full volumes of the High Republic out, and then there's also only like 2 volumes of the High Republic Adventures out. So in like 4 months time there's probably going to be one more of each, and then we'll kind of see where we go from there. But that's the general background information and stuff. As I said, Light of the Jedi, make sure you read that. If you don't, check out my review, because what I do with my book reviews is I give them spoiler-free for the first third, and then the second part I will then do like a little few mild spoilers and things, and then the final part I generally do a bit more spoilery stuff, and I give you guys like general plot details of the book in itself, just in case you didn't want to pick it up and read it, or if you don't have time, because it's like a 400-page book, and there's one of these coming out every 6 months, plus the young adult novel that's 300-something pages, plus the junior novel, which is 150 odd pages. So there's a ridiculous amount to consume, but don't worry guys, that's what I'm here for. But yeah, that's enough waffle from me about all that background information and stuff. So let's get into the comic itself. So issues 1 to 5 are collected, and the story arc is called There Is No Fear. Issue number 1 was released the 6th of January 2021. The 5th issue was released May 12th, 2021, and then the trade paperback collection was released September 7th, 2021. The writer is Cavan Scott, the penciler is Ario Anindito, the inker is Mark Morales, and the colour artist is Annalisa Leone. Cavan Scott has also done the Tempest Runner audio drama, which I lightly tackled when I did the book review of his adult novel that he wrote, which is The Rising Storm, which is in the first phase, but the second wave. So in broad strokes, The Rising Storm is basically a sequel to Light of the Jedi, and you don't have to have read that to enjoy this one, but when we get to volume 2, it will be one of those little recommendations. But yeah guys, with that all in mind, let's get into the first issue. So I'm going to read you the crawl. The galaxy is at peace, ruled by the glorious Republic and protected by the noble and wise Jedi Knights. As a symbol of all that is good, the Republic is about to launch Starlight Beacon into the far reaches of the Outer Rim. This new space station will serve as a ray of hope for all to see. But just as a magnificent renaissance spreads throughout the Republic, so does a frightening new adversary. Now, the Guardians of Peace and Justice must face a threat to themselves, the galaxy, and the Force itself. And I just want to add in here that you may have heard me speak about the main antagonists of the High Republic, and that, at least for the first phase, has been the Nihil. Now, the Nihil don't actually feature in these comics as of yet. In Volume 2, they're a bit more involved in things, but I think it's probably going to be Volume 3 is the main part they're going to be involved with quite heavily. But this is specifically around something called the Drengir. Now, if you don't know what the Drengir are, I mean, I'll go for it a little bit in this comic, but the main way to find out how they came about and the story that unfolds to kind of introduce them to the galaxy is Claudia Gray's young adult novel called Into the Dark. And I released my review of that on the 2nd of October 2021, and within that I go through the story obviously towards the end, and I talk about how it affects the galaxy and those sorts of things, as well as giving a lot of information on the Drengir. So if you want to know background information on how this all kind of got started, either read this comic, because there's like 1 or 2 panels that do kind of skim over it and vaguely explain the space station, where it all came from. But if you want a more in-depth explanation, and you don't want to have to read a 300-odd page book, check out my book review. So the comic starts with a character called Keeve Trennis. She is a Jedi padawan, she is a human, and she's brilliant, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think she's a really, really interesting character, and I really like watching her sort of career as a Jedi unfold as we go through the High Republic. And I also want to clarify that the next wave of the High Republic stuff, so the Rising Storm, as well as Out of the Shadows, Race to Crash Point Tower, and Volume 2 of these comics is set round about 6 months to a year after these events. So each wave within a phase is approximately 6 months to a year. It kind of depends on the content. Obviously, the comics, these get released monthly. So I think the comics are quite a good way to see almost a couple weeks at a time as we go through the High Republic, whereas the books are a lot more, here's a week, but since the last book, it's been several months. They're normally, when you start the book, it's normally quite a good, one of the characters makes some sort of offhand comment like, oh, it's been however long since this thing happened, and whatever the thing they described was in the last book. So that's just what I want to clarify here. But yeah, she is a padawan, and she is speaking with something called a Ximpi, Ximpi. Now, a Ximpi, the way I best describe it is like a pixie in Harry Potter. So in the Chamber of Secrets, when Lockhart is teaching the Defense Against the Dark Arts, and then all those blue pixies come out and start picking people up, including Neville by his ears somehow, they look just a lot like those. Now, they were actually first in Charles Soule's mini-series called Lando. They were also in the Poe Dameron comics, also by Charles Soule, and they have also appeared in the Dr. Aphra comics as well. But yeah, they're just small, maybe probably the size of like maybe an American football from top to bottom, maybe even a bit smaller than that. They are blue and they are creatures that can fly. So very similar to what we understand as a pixie anyway. So this Ximpi is called Canry, and Keeve is looking around in this sort of forest kind of planet area, and she says she can feel the force in the area. And then a one-armed Trandoshan attacks her, and she ignites her dual-bladed lightsaber. Now, Trandoshan, I've mentioned this so many times, especially whilst doing War of the Bounty Hunters, because Trandoshans came up a lot. But the most famous Trandoshan is Bossk. Obviously, you get to see him in Empire Strikes Back. I have a suspicion that he's going to pop up in the Book of Boba Fett. At the point of recording this, I'm on episode 3, and he hasn't appeared yet, but we've still got, another 4 episodes to go. I would be quite surprised if we don't see Bossk or Dengar or some other people like that. But anyway, they're basically just lizard people, is the kind of way one would describe them. They're generally green-skinned, they've got quite sharp teeth, and they are usually quite aligned with the dark side. Not that they're necessarily Sith or Force users, but generally speaking, they are around the galaxy. They are hunters, both bounty hunters, but also they worship something called the Great Scorekeeper. So when they kill someone, they think it kind of adds like a point system for like some reward by their god. That's like a really, really loose way of thinking about it. And so obviously having that religion basically pushed on you and you believing in that, it glorifies killing, and it means, you get more points, I think, for the harder the kill and the more complicated and all these sorts of other ways in which one can kill someone. So that's kind of, why a lot of Trandoshans are bad. This Trandoshan is called Sskeer, and he actually lost his arm in the book Light of the Jedi. It happens at a point in the book, either you know or you don't, but it was basically, he was in a ship and something hits the ship and it severs his arm. Now, Trandoshans can actually grow back their arms. I think it takes quite a while. It's not like Piccolo in Dragon Ball Z where you can just focus and it grows back. I think similarly to a lizard, it takes several days, weeks, months sort of thing, but he will eventually grow back. But anyway, these two clash sabers, so they're fighting each other, and it's back and forth and things, and then Keeve manages to get Sskeer to the floor. So after a little bit of fighting and things, it's confirmed that they are just basically training, and that they are Master and Padawan. So Sskeer then says to Keeve that she's here for her Jedi trial, and Jedi trials, when you're a padawan, you do your trial, and if you succeed, you then become a Jedi. I think if you fail, I don't think in the canon we've come across like explicit examples of people failing. I know people have done. I don't know if you fail and you get to try again. I don't really know what the details are there. Hopefully we'll find out, but as I said, at the moment we don't really know. But as an example, Obi-Wan, he didn't have a trial specifically because when he fought Darth Maul and killed him in The Phantom Menace, that just was like counted as the trial. And there's lots of instances in the Clone Wars where the Jedi don't have like a necessary trial. They're just a Padawan with their master fighting in a war, and then they get good enough and they, basically do some sort of great feat in war, and then they become a main Jedi. And that's, a big whole problem with the Jedi's mindset in the Clone Wars. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 220 years ahead of myself if I'm being specific. But Sskeer, so he says to her that the Jedi trial, to basically pass it, she needs to recover a pendant that he's put at this top of this like rock needle. It's basically like a big group of these 100-foot tall thin bits of rock. It's almost like if you got a tree trunk and then it had no branches on it or anything and you let it go really high and the top was a point. That's kind of what it is, made out of rock. So she starts to climb, and that Ximpi called Canry is following her and just talking in her ear and basically just distracting her and things. There's needles that are breaking, and then she's like jumping, from one needle to another and things, climbing up to get this pendant. And then she hears a noise, and she turns around and sees these giant bugs attack. They're about the size of like a bus, as in, probably a double-decker bus thinking about it, but they look like red locusts. And they get named something a little bit later on, but they're actually called the Ridadi, or Ridadi, R-I-D-A-D-I. And yeah, they're basically just giant space locusts, and I'll go a little bit more into them when we kind of get there. But yeah, these giant space locusts then attack, then it cuts away to, meanwhile, on Starlight Beacon. So Starlight Beacon was mentioned in the crawl. It was created for hyperspace assistance. There's also shelter for people nearby. People can get support there. There's like medical bays. There's a fleet of ships on there as well. There's a Jedi temple. There's like communication networks and things. So it's just like a big hub in the middle of space that is helpful for communicating with parts of the Outer Rim where the Republic may not be able to get someone there ridiculously quickly. Because obviously from like the core worlds, like Coruscant, which is like in the middle, if you have any problems in Coruscant, they can just ping someone to you really, really quickly. As you get further and further away from the inner rim of the planets and the core worlds and things, then you get to the outer rim and things are just more spread apart and stuff, and it's less civilized in essence, it's less built up. So Starlight Beacon, the way that hyperspace works, at least in the High Republic, once again, 200 odd years before we've seen it in the Skywalker saga, they need beacons to assist them with plotting a course through hyperspace, because basically your computer goes, this, if we go here and here and here, it's completely clear of asteroids and of planets, anything like that. So if we go faster than light speed through this route, we'll get to the planet that we need to go to really, really quickly. If they don't plan those routes, then you could just go faster than light speed and smash into like a planet, which not only would completely disintegrate you, but it would also decimate large parts of the planet. And that specific scenario is actually tackled in the first act of The Light of the Jedi. So yeah, on Starlight Beacon, you've got a character called Avar Kriss talking to a character called Maru. Now, Avar Kriss, she is like the poster child of the Jedi Order in a way. She's a Jedi Master. She's incredibly proficient at what she does. In Light of the Jedi, she's like the star of the show in a lot of ways. She has this innate force ability to kind of connect everyone's minds together, so everyone knows what everyone else is kind of thinking when they're trying to like do battle plans and stuff like that. And one of the things I like about her is that she interprets the Force as a song. Now, everyone in the High Republic has their own interpretation of how they see the Force. Some people see it as like an ocean, some people see it as fire, some people see it as, like Avar Kriss does, the wind. I think Ram Jaram sees it as almost like a gears and mechanism and things. He's a character from Race to Crash Point Tower, which is a book I have not yet reviewed. But basically, the authors have gone into the detail that every Jedi perceives the Force in a slightly different way. And Avar Kriss, she perceives it as a song. So she can like hear people's songs, and that's hearing their connection to the Force, which is it's quite an interesting thing. But she's a very powerful, very intelligent master. She's very reasonable. I would probably compare her most to maybe like Obi-Wan Kenobi in certain ways. She's that kind of Jedi. And yeah, she's brilliant. So she's talking to a guy called Maru. Now, Maru's full name is Estala Maru. He is a Kessurian. So Kessurian, they are humanoid-like beings, and they are often red-skinned. They have horn-like montrals, and around their cheeks, they have like lighter mottled skin, kind of like freckles. And you actually first got to see a Caesarian in The Rise of Skywalker, so they've only been a very recent addition to the Star Wars canon. They look a little bit like Devaronians, but slightly less menacing, basically. And they've got like a slight, not quite lizard-like, not necessarily reptilian, but a kind of a slightly more animalistic look than a standard other humanoid. Like, they don't necessarily look like an alien, necessarily. They look more like an anthropomorphic animal that we get on Earth, if you kind of know what I'm saying there. But he's like one of the main people at Starlight Beacon for communications and things. He's surrounded by loads of screens and whatnot. He's kind of like, to quote, like the guy in the chair, basically, to quote Ned from the recent Spider-Man movies. You know, someone's always got to have a guy in the chair who's communicating with people, who can scan loads of stuff, who can do technical readouts on things. That's what Maru does. So Maru can't actually locate Sskeer at the moment. Obviously, he's on this planet with Keeve Trennis. And Avar is saying that she's actually having trouble trying to locate him. She can't actually hear his Force song. And then two individuals appear, Yoda and a guy called Vetter. Now, you guys know who Yoda is. You know, at this point, he's in his, not quite as old as he is when he passes away in Return of the Jedi. He is 200 years younger than that. Well, nearer 250 years younger than that, really. But when he dies, he's around, I think, 900 years old. So at this point, he's like 670 to 700-ish years old. He's not the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. This guy called Vetter actually is. Yoda's been going around and he's been training up younglings. He's been exploring the galaxy. He's been, I think, pathfinding. I don't know if I'm making that word up, but he's basically been going around and kind of doing his own thing, not sat in the Jedi Temple like we see him in the prequels. He appears a lot more in the High Republic Adventures comics, which I'll be tackling in a couple weeks' time, so you get a bit more information on him there. But when Yoda and Vetter appear, so Vetter is a species called a Tarnab. Now, Tarnabs, they are quite hairy. They've got several small horns going up their cheeks and up their head. Their noses, they don't have it's almost like if you cut someone's nose from the base of the septum just directly upwards. So it's kind of like an open nostril sort of thing. And there is actually several of them in the canon. You get to see them in the Clone Wars, I think was one of the first times you got to see it. And that is a character called Pra-Tree, I believe. And I think they're like a senator or something like that. But yeah, they've been around for a little bit. You would have seen them before, but they're not one of the most recognizable species. But he is the current Grand Master, and they arrive on the Starlight Beacon to speak to Chancellor So about Bacta manufacturing. So Bacta manufacturing, Bacta is something that throughout Legends and throughout the canon in Star Wars, we all know what Bacta does. It heals people. If anyone's watching Book of Boba Fett, all flashback things happen with him being in Bacta. And it's just a healing agent. You get to see Luke in it in Empire Strikes Back at the start after he gets fought by the Wampa. And before they had Bacta, they used something else, which I think gets mentioned later on in the comics, so I'll tackle it there. But at this point, this is when Bacta is becoming a lot more common, a lot more widespread. But that's not the only reason that Yoda and Vetter are actually on Starlight Beacon, because they ask Avar Kriss to become the Marshal of Starlight Beacon, so the head of it all. She initially thinks that they're trying to get her to join the Jedi Council again, which she keeps declining, and yeah, so they want her to be Marshal of Starlight Beacon. So we go back to Keeve Trennis, and we've got these Ridadi heading for this city of the Ximpi. So Keeve abandons her Jedi trial, trying to get that pendant and things. She gets into her ship, which is called a Vector. At the High Republic era, they've got Vector ships, which I'll go into at another point, because I've spoken about them quite a lot in the other books, as well, in the other things I've done. But it's a very small 1 or 2 person ship, and you have to put your lightsaber in to power up the weapons and certain extra controls and things. But it has no shields or anything like that, because a Jedi is meant to be able to use the Force to be able to fly a ship without getting hit and etc. But she gets into a Vector and then follows these Ridadi, abandoning the trial, and she communicates to Maru, asking, what are these things? So he confirms their name, Ridadi, and says they're these giant space locusts. So she tries to connect with them using the Force, because, they're living beings and things. And there's an incredible panel of artwork, which is actually one of the variant covers, which I have as well, of Keeve Trennis in this Force vision space thing. It just looks really cool. And, when I post on social media and on Patreon about these Star Wars comics and things, you'll get to see what I am referring to. So Keeve then connects with these creatures, and she figures out that it's actually Starlight Beacon signal which is causing a disruption to them, because Maru confirms that basically they travel through the galaxy. It's quite rare to see them. They don't attack things intentionally, but one of the ways they seem to communicate with each other seems to be at a certain frequency, and that's what Starlight Beacon's pumping out, which is what is disrupting them. So Maru changes the frequency of Starlight Beacon, and then Keeve broadcasts Starlight Beacon's old frequency out of her vector ship. So all of the locusts then follow her up, and she flies like straight up into the air, so aiming to go outside the atmosphere of this planet. They continue to follow, and then she jumps out the vector, and they go on their way. So then she lands and she speaks to the Ximpi and things and helps them repair a little bit of the damage they've sustained. Their city is still relatively fine. It's just a few buildings and things have been damaged. So she helps repair those and that sort of stuff. And then Sskeer comes up and speaks to her. He doesn't really say much, and then he takes her off to Starlight Beacon to go and meet with Avar Kriss. And Keeve is very worried and upset and thinking she's going to be in trouble and she's failed her trial, etc., etc. And Sskeer's like, just be quiet and listen to what Avar has to say. And then Avar Kriss knights Keeve Trennis, saying that she passed her Jedi trial, which is a really nice moment. And so this comic starts to wrap up. It's at the Starlight Beacon dedication ceremony. So like the grand opening of Starlight Beacon. And I just want to read out what Avar Kriss has to say because, well, it's somewhat inspirational. And Avar Kriss, and more so Kevin Scott, who wrote this, has got a real way with words. So I'm just going to read this out for you. My friends, this beacon is a symbol of hope. Not just for pioneers on the frontier, or for those who join the Republic day by day. Starlight is a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy, a symbol of trust, of unity. Whenever you feel alone, whenever darkness closes in, hear our signal and know that the Force is with you. Know that we are with you. This is our promise. This is our covenant. For light and life. And they all lift up their lightsabers, and then everyone in this whole giant atrium area, there's politicians there like Chancellor So, there's loads of Jedi there, including Beriaga, who I mentioned before, lots of Jedi that you get to see from the book Light of the Jedi and these sort of things. They will hold their lightsabers up and all yell for light and life. And then you've got Keeve Trennis there, standing with her lightsaber up, and it's got like this really nice panel. Once again, the thing of them all holding their lightsabers up, that's on one of the, I think that's the second or third printing of issue number 1, which I also have. Once again, check out those photos on social media. And Keeve Trennis has got tears in her eyes because, she passed her test and it's a very big emotional thing. And she's right up there on the stage next to Sskeer and also Avar Kriss. And all these Jedi are wearing their ceremonial robes. So it's all very white and gold and stuff. So it all looks very cool. And for light and life, that is a seemingly High Republic like motto in a way. So a lot of the High Republic Jedi, that's a kind of, obviously may the Force be with you is kind of like a wish you good luck and like a salutation to say goodbye to people. And for light and life, that's meant to be the motto of the Jedi of this era. And then just before this comic ends, the last couple of pages show that after this dedication ceremony, Sskeer goes to his room by himself and something is clearly quite wrong with him. And then he yells out, "No," very loudly, but in private, and that is where issue number 1 ends. So issue number 2 starts with Keeve flying a ship along with Sskeer and 2 twins. So these twins are called Ceret and Terec, so C-E-R-E-T, and then you swap the T and the C around for the other one, and they are Force Bond identical twins. The way Keeve describes them, because all of these High Republic comics have got Keeve's like internal monologue and stuff, so you really get to find out about the character herself and what she's thinking, and it really helps. It adds a lot of weight to the character. Obviously, I'm not reading all those things out because I'm just giving you guys general plot details, but I do recommend, as with all the comics I review on the show and talk about on the show, I always recommend you guys pick these ones up. And I think on Marvel Unlimited at the moment, it's got the first 2 full volumes of the High Republic up to issue 10 or 11, I think. But yeah, anyway, these twins, they basically, the way Keeve explains it is they share the same mind. So they always know what the other one is thinking. They finish each other's sentences, that sort of thing. So these 4 Jedi then head to a ship that they found, which is nearly destroyed. They confirm that there's some life signs on the ship in this pressurized part of the hull, so they go aboard. It's confirmed that the Nile have attacked this ship. There's this gas everywhere, which is what the Nile use to attack. There's this gas that generally hurts people. It's hard to see through. It incapacitates some people. It can kill people with long exposure, I believe. And so the Jedi use rebreathers. Now, rebreathers are first seen in The Phantom Menace. Now, rebreather is how it sounds. You put basically a gas mask-esque thing on, but it looks, futuristic and sciencey. But the rebreathers that you actually see in The Phantom Menace are specific water rebreathers. And they are called A99 Aquator breathers. So they're just a variation of that. But yeah, that's when you would have first seen them. So the Jedi are walking around this ship when there's just like wreckage everywhere and gas and bodies and things. And Sskeer is having these traumatic flashbacks from when he'd lost his arm in Light of the Jedi. So the group then split up. You've got Terec with Sskeer and Ceret with Keeve Trennis kind of looking around trying to work out what's happened and find these people that have seemingly survived. And the twins can sense this trauma that Sskeer has got. So after a little bit of exploration, Keeve and Ceret then find a corpse of a hut, which is quite rare. As they find that, it shows that Sskeer finds this crop of some sort. Before he can kind of work out exactly what this crop is, there's a couple of shots from a blaster that are fired. Terec is injured, so Sskeer pursues the unseen shooter. He can't sense them at all, and they attack, they jump from above, basically on top of him, but just before they land, he sees them and cuts them in half. Sskeer then proceeds to butcher the corpse, so there's two halves of this Nile on the floor, seemingly dead or dying, and he's yelling no while lifting his lightsaber up and bringing it down over and over and over again. So he is just patéing this Nile corpse, which is not what the Jedi are meant to do. As he's doing that, Keeve notices him just as he kind of seems to stop, and Keeve is obviously affected by this in some way, but they contact Avar and Maru, basically asking him what this crop that Sskeer has found. Obviously there's a corpse of a hut, there's Nile have attacked, trying to work out why on earth this is, and they confirm it is actually a barley crop which is used for making Bacta. And I said earlier that I would confirm what that was before Bacta. It was something called Rejuve, R-E-J-U-V. I believe probably something similar-ish to Bacta, but it's just not as good as Bacta. So Rejuve, I'm sure we're going to get more into that when we go into the next phase of the High Republic, because the next phase of the High Republic is going to be set 150 years before this wave is. So I think that means it's going to be set at 380 something years before the Battle of Yavin, and at that point I don't know if Bacta had just been discovered or what, but Rejuve is going to be coming up more and more again in Star Wars content, especially when you start going further back. I just know that it's not as effective as Bacta is. So the Jedi will discuss that apparently no crops have been reported as stolen, so it seems that they obtained these in a somewhat legitimate manner from a planet called Sedri Minor. There was a colony founded there about 12 years prior, but there's not really been much contact from this colony since. So Avar tells Sskeer and Ceret to go to Sedri Minor, while Keeve and Terec wait while Avar goes to meet them. So Sskeer and Ceret then go to Sedri Minor, they land, and this guy comes up and speaks to them who is called Kalo Solomon, and he says that they are independent, so Jedi are not welcome. This guy, Kalo Solomon, he is a Artiodac. Now, Artiodacs are from Artoid Minor. You first saw them in The Force Awakens. They have got tough hides, and they can live for centuries, and their history confirms that they were enslaved by the Zygerian Empire. The Zygerians are mentioned in the Clone Wars. There's actually like an episode where Anakin comes in contact with them. They basically, they're slavers, so not goodies. But yeah, these Artiodacs, imagine kind of like, it's like a humanoid figure, but really bulky with really tough skin, and their head looks a little bit like a thumb. Like, it's kind of somewhat pointed, there's not really any hair in it, and it doesn't really seem to have much of a neck. That's basically what he looks like. So while Sskeer is talking to this Kalo gentleman, Ceret is like beckoned away by like someone there, like a kid or something. So he goes over there to kind of find out what's happening, and then this big plant tentacle appears behind him. It then cuts to Avar, who is with Keeve, and Avar sees the corpses, including the corpse that Sskeer butchered, and Avar is very concerned. Terec then yells out, saying that Ceret is really bad, something's happened to him, he's not fully sure what, because obviously they have this conjoined mind in some ways. And so Avar comes to Sskeer, who tries to look around to find out where Ceret's gone while he was talking to Kalo, and all he can find is his lightsaber. And that, my friends, is where issue number 2 ends. So we move on to issue number 3. Issue 3 starts with Terec going a bit mad. He is muttering about darkness grows and it must be nourished and things, and that we've already lost. And so Avar is pretty annoyed at Sskeer for not only butchering the Nile, but also losing Ceret, which is obviously making Terec go bad, because obviously their minds are connected and stuff. So Keeve is waiting outside the ship where Avar, Sskeer, and Terec are all sort of talking, or they're trying to sort out Terec, and then some of the planet's inhabitants offer Keeve some food and say to give it to the Jedi and things. She politely declines, and then a Rodian says that their son is missing and their crops are dying, and they actually say that 5 people have gone missing, including Ceret. Now, I just want to clarify here, a Rodian is a very common species in Star Wars. The most famous one would be Greedo from A New Hope, the person where Han shot first or Greedo shot first, the eternal Star Wars debate. They come in a variety of colours, green, but they're sometimes yellow or red or turquoise. There was one actually in the first episode of Book of Boba Fett that was actually voiced by Sam Witwer, which is quite interesting. And they have, big eyes. Megan describes them as big space eyes, because when they're in the Clone Wars, they look quite spacey, which is cool. They have some antenna, and their fingers are quite big, but they've got these suction cups at the end, which is quite interesting. They also have snouts on their faces, and they are from the planet of Rodia. There's the language of the Rodians, then there's also Galactic Basic, but in the canon we see quite a lot of them speak Huttese, because a lot of the Rodians we see seem to be working for the Hutts in some capacity. But anyway, back to the story. So you've got this guy, Kalo Salman, who then gets involved with this Rodian talking to Keeve Trennis about these people who are missing, and Kalo says that he speaks for the community, and the Rodian does not seem very thrilled about that. And so Keeve mentions that they found a Hutt ship, and Kalo says that they're going to deal with it themselves, and he tries to kind of get the inhabitants to leave the Jedi. Keeve notes that they're all scared, including Kalo, and so she decides to go investigate while Sskeer and Avar and stuff are on the ship kind of arguing. So while Keeve is trying to investigate the crops and work out what's going on, this small human kid starts talking to her, and she can't really shake him, so he just kind of tags along, and they start to look around, and she senses shadows and things. She finds this big sinkhole to which the kid jumps down in, which she then has to use the force to stop him, dying, because it's quite a big drop. And he just laughs and things, and she's like, you shouldn't do that. And he's like, well, I knew you'd catch me. And she's like, all right, okay, but you shouldn't know that I'll catch you. And he's like, but I thought I meant to trust the Jedi. And it's like, okay, I can see where this sort of conversation is going. One that one can't win with seemingly like an 8-year-old or something. But meanwhile, back with Avar and Sskeer, they're talking, and Avar questions Sskeer's abilities because he doesn't even sense the dark side that was here, whereas Avar and obviously Keeve can really sense it. Maru then communicates to her, and it confirms that they're now doing the autopsy on the Hutt back at Starlight Beacon. And while this is happening, that Kalo Solomon chap then wanders onto the Jedi ship and is annoyed because he says that Keeve Trennis is sneaking around. So Avar says, okay, well, I'll come with you. Sskeer, you stay here, and me and Kalo will go find out what's happened to Keeve. So back to Keeve, she's crawling through some cave systems and things with this kid, and they manage to find Ceret as well as the young Rodian, who is this kid's friend and the son of those two Rodians who spoke with Keeve earlier. They have got vines wrapped around them and also going into them. So they actually have vines going up their nose, into their mouth. It's pretty grueling. You can tell that Cavan Scott wrote a lot of this because he's a big horror fan, and he does do horror quite well in Star Wars, and it's pretty horrific, not going to lie. So Keeve goes to let the Rodian kid down and also Ceret, but it turns out that the Rodian kid is dead, whereas Ceret still seems to be alive. While they're kind of checking on these bodies, then a vine grabs this kid on the leg. Keeve turns, and then it shows that there is actually a Drengir there, and then Ceret starts to talk quite strangely. So a little bit of information on the Drengir. I want to clarify, this is minor spoilers for Into the Dark, but I think it's in the next issue, number 4, if you're reading along with me talking about this. Specifically, they literally tell you the plot of Into the Dark. So if you're going to continue to either listen to me talk about these comics or read the comics, it's going to do slight spoilers for Into the Dark. And I would recommend reading Into the Dark. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it that doesn't get outlined in this little bit of information I'm going to give you. The character of Reath Silas is really interesting, and he pops up again in Out of the Shadows. And yeah, just a lot of the characters that are introduced in the first 3 High Republic books, Light of the Jedi, A Test of Courage, and Into the Dark, are all really interesting people. But basically the Drengir, they are living plants. They were sealed away by Sith thousands of years ago on the Amaxine station, which is where a lot of Into the Dark takes place. And basically because the Jedi were stranded on the station and they moved these special totems that were keeping the Drengir in place, then the Drengir managed to escape. There's something called the Great Progenitor, and it's basically the lead Drengir, maybe it was the first one, who knows, but it's kind of the one that semi-controls them and communicates to all the other Drengir. The Drengir standard, they are massive plants. Imagine a giant Christmas tree that's probably about 10 foot tall, but the top of the Christmas tree is like a beaked mouth almost kind of thing. And it's got vines that grow out of it seemingly infinitely, and they shuffle and move towards people. They can talk, but if you try and slice them with a lightsaber, they don't die. If you slice it down the middle, then the 2 halves will then just grow, and then you'll have 2 giant Drengir to deal with. And they also eat people, both humans and also non-humans. They just eat living beings, calling them meat. And they have this sort of hive mind that connects them. And they're spread across the galaxy and things, so that's basically all the Drengir information you need for the time being. So back to the story. So I said about Ceret was talking weirdly after the Drengir kind of comes alive when Keeve is down in the cave system, and then his twin, Terec, is then starting to act a little bit strange in front of Sskeer, and then spews this black tar stuff at Sskeer, kind of like vomits, kind of coughs. It's pretty unpleasant. Then both of the twins are clearly under the Drengir's control. And then the comic starts to end where Avar Kriss then appears down where Keeve is. She jumps down like the sinkhole, slices one of the Drengir in half, and then manages to clear Terec's mind with the Force. And then the final panel of this comic shows that now Sskeer is under the control of the Drengir. He's got these vines going up his nose, and he seems to have grown back his arm, but it's like a viney, Drengirish arm. So with that being issue number 3, let's move on to the penultimate issue number 4. So this starts off with 6 years ago. You've got Sskeer training a younger Keeve Trennis, trying to get her to jump over this quite big pit, I'd call it. It kind of makes me think of The Matrix, if I'm being completely honest with you, when Morpheus is trying to get Neo to jump over the buildings and things. And at this point, Sskeer is a calm and a good master. He's very patient, he's not yelling or anything like that, he's not aggressive at all. Then it cuts back to now, and obviously that was Keeve just remembering some of the time where she was training with Sskeer, helping her try and jump across this big cavern basically, and then she fails, and then he uses the Force to catch her, bring her back, and they just keep trying until she kind of gets it. So it flicks back to now, and as I confirmed, Sskeer has got like an arm made out of like Drengir roots, and now Avar, the kid, both the twins, and Keeve are all now tied up with vines all wrapped around them and things. Avar questions Sskeer, saying about him cutting himself off from the Force, and he says that she needs to listen to the Song of the Drengir. I'm just going to read a little bit of Skeer's dialogue because I think it works quite well here. Once, the Drengir spread across the galaxy, feasting on flesh and bone wherever it was found. The harvest was abundant. The harvest was plentiful. Others saw our power and reaped alongside us, working together for the greatest gain. But nothing lasts forever. Soon they betrayed us, as was their nature. Soon they paid the price. Fearing what they could not kill, they plotted against us. They trapped the first of us within their totems, forcing her to sleep. And while the great progenitor slept, we slept also beneath the ground, until travellers stumbled upon the progenitor, waking her from her slumber. Waking us all. So as I mentioned earlier on in this episode, it was the Sith that actually closed off the Drengir from the rest of the universe. So if you want more information on that, as I said, read the young adult novel Into the Dark. And I've done a book review on that, so you could listen to that if you want, because towards the end I then give out some more major plot details. But moving on in this comic, so after you hear Sskeer's, after he's been possessed by the Drengir, his kind of speech, it then shows Starlight Beacon. So you've got Imri, Kantaros, Venestra Rowe, and Oberlin all checking this hut corpse along with Maru. Now, Imri Kantaros, he is a padawan to Venestra Rowe. You find out their story in A Test of Courage, which is a junior novel, which I really recommend actually. It was a surprisingly brilliant book for something that's aimed at a younger audience, and I did tackle that back in August of 2021, so if you want to hear my review on that and some details of the plot for there, make sure you check that out too. So Venestra is a Mirielin, it's always hard to pronounce that, same as Luminara Unduli, who is a famous Jedi from the Clone Wars. They have green skin and they often have black markings that I believe are small tattoos and things. Imri is just a human and he's a very strong empath. They go into that a lot more in A Test of Courage and also into Out of the Shadows. It's really interesting. He can almost read people's minds because he's so good at telling what emotions people are experiencing. They doesn't really delve into that in these comics, but he's a really interesting character, and he does have a little moment where he almost goes to the dark side and stuff in one of the books as well, which I won't spoil, but you guys check that out, it's really cool. And then the character called Oberlin, he's a species which is an Ugor, U-G-O-R, it might be Ugor. They're basically this blob-like substance in a way, but he walks around in this astronaut kind of suit to kind of keep his blob-like form in a sort of humanoid shape, and he's actually the first in the Jedi Order of his species to be enrolled. And you do actually get to see someone wearing the same suit who is seemingly an Ugor or Ugor in Solo, a Star Wars story. But he is basically just a backgroundy character. So the main way you can find out about these is actually in the Rising Storm book by Kevin Scott. He's in that quite a bit. But yes, they're checking this hut corpse, and Imri finds some roots in the veins of the hut, which is pretty horrendous. Then the hut's corpse starts to kind of move and shuffle and things, and then these giant like root tentacle things flail out of the inside of this corpse, spraying bits of hut everywhere, and now this is basically part of the Drengir trying to attack them that's kind of coming out of a hut carcass. Maru makes a comment saying that their quarantine measures are going to be tested to the limit with this, and then it goes back to Keeve. Keeve is talking to Sskeer, and vines have just gone into Keeve's mouth as well as Avar's, the twins, and that boy who was with them, and so Keeve is just begging Sskeer to try and help. After a bit of back and forth, Sskeer then becomes a little bit lucid, and he says he's sorry, he did this and allowed himself to get taken over by the Drengir so he could try and understand the Drengir's weaknesses and things. He then uses the Force to throw the Drengir that have got these guys up into the air. The Jedi get free, but the kid is carried with them, and the Drengir and this kid fly through the ceiling of this cave that they're in and land above ground. Once the Jedi are free, they then jump through the hole that was made in the ceiling of this cave and go and attack the Drengir. So when they attack the Drengir, they end up slicing bits of the Drengir with their lightsabers, and it actually shows that it hurts Sskeer, clearly because of his connection to them with that arm thing that's connected to him. So Sskeer says that he'll help. He uses the Force to hold all the Drengir in place, while all the other Jedi then just slice them down and things. Then, meanwhile, it shows that Kalo Salman has a little confrontation with those Rodian parents whose son they've clearly lost. So Kalo's threatening them and things, saying that they shouldn't have spoken to the Jedi about these matters, and he punches the Rodian in the face, saying that he needs to pay for that. Then back to Avar, Sskeer and Keeve. They actually enter the hut that Kalo is in, and then they threaten Kalo, saying, you need to get back, stop being violent, etc. And Sskeer retaliates by using the Force to slam Kalo into the ceiling of the hut and drop him on the ground. Avar is not happy about that, but then it cuts to Starlight Beacon and shows that the Drengir is now fully attacking everyone. Then the last few panels on issue number 4 show that a hut appears along with some Rancors, some Gamorrean guards and things, and this hut is called Mayaga. They appear due to some sort of bargain that has been agreed upon with this planet and the Hutt cartel, and so the Jedi are now outside and they prepare for a confrontation. And the final words from this hut says that this planet is now owned by the Hutt cartel. So that's where issue 4 ends, so let's move on to the final issue, issue number 5. So issue 5 starts with Keeve is now deflecting blaster bolts and Ceret is trying to get the villagers to safety. Ceret tries to use the Force on a Rancor that is coming near him and it doesn't work and the Rancor just steps on him. It then shows a little thing which is before this happened, like how do they go from the last thing that we saw to Keeve now deflecting loads of blaster bolts and things. It shows that Mayaga the Hutt is saying that they're here to protect these colonists who signed a contract. They would give the grain, which is the Bacta grain, in exchange for protection. Avar then starts talking to the Hutt, and Sskeer is getting agitated and impatient, so instead of letting them communicate more, he then launches his vine arm thing that extends right at Mayaga the Hutt, and then it causes an entire shootout. Then some mercenaries emerge from the Hutt ship, and a mini war then goes on. So that was kind of what caused the events before this thing. I'm not 100% sure why they only did that for a few pages, but still. Then you move on to Avar contacting Maru at Starlight Beacon, but the Drengir infestation has actually gotten worse, and they still aren't able to send any help down to the planet Sidri Minor that the rest of them are on, so they're left by themselves. Also on Starlight Beacon, you've got Imri gets stabbed by a Drengir, and the Drengir starts trying to suck away his life force, but Venestra manages to save him, and they're trying to work out how they could get rid of the Drengir. Back on Sidri Minor, it shows that Ceret is holding the Rancor's mouth open, just about to be eaten. He's like standing in like a kind of star shape, holding the jaws open, and he's thinking, oh, I could really use my lightsaber right now. And then Terec appears with his lightsaber as well as Ceret's lightsaber, and then they both together manage to overcome the Rancor by Terec actually puts his hand on the Rancor's head and just makes it instantly go to sleep. Avar is yelling at Sskeer, telling him to release Mayaga so they can try and stop this fighting going on, but neither Mayaga or Sskeer are listening. They're like fighting and tussling and throwing each other around and things. So Keeve then steps in to help and cuts Skeer's vine arm off. While she tends to Sskeer, Avar confronts Mayaga. Sskeer then grows like this sword cleaver thing out of his arm vines that, although Keeve cut them off, they then, the roots are still infested into his body, so they just grow this big sword thing, and then he launches at Keeve. And he's kind of like talking to himself while this is happening in this sort of Drengir voice. Then it goes back to Kalo Salman, who is now packing to leave and things because all this shootout and this craziness is going on. The Rodians, along with a couple of villagers then, find him and go into the hut which he is hiding in and confirm that he's to blame for all this. He's the reason they didn't get the Jedi involved in time, he's the reason the huts are now here and made a deal with it, so the Rodian, in response, punches him in the face this time, which I think, I'm not normally up for violence, but this guy just sucks, Kaela Solomon, and he 100% deserves it. Then, before the confrontation can heat up any more, one of the Rancors breaks through the nearby wall of the hut. It goes back to Keeve and Sskeer who are fighting, and Sskeer manages to get his mind back. He says that he is losing his Force connection, which is why he's been acting so strange recently, and why he didn't know about the swarm, why he didn't sense the dark side, and all these sort of things. And then Sskeer continues and says that he was ashamed of all of this, which is why he didn't tell Keeve previously. Then it shows Kaela Solomon once again. He is now running away from the villagers and the place he was packing all his stuff and things, and he gets caught by a Drengir, and we never see him again, which is completely fine on my part. It then shows that Sskeer has an idea and then goes to Avar, and Avar plays thousands of distress calls that she's received from Starlight Beacon right to Mayaga the Hutt, showing that a lot of the territories that the Hutts have, including their homeworld of Nal Hutta, are now under attack from the Drengir. So Avar suggests that the Hutts and the Jedi work together because the Drengir is a much bigger villain than either of them are to each other. After a bit back and forth, Mayaga then reluctantly agrees to this, and then it goes to Sskeer again. Sskeer tells Keeve to do the mind touch for him and the Drengir to think that the meat is rotten. So mind touch is kind of like a Jedi mind trick, but I don't know if they call it slightly different things here, but it's kind of like a more forced one. You see it in the Clone Wars when Anakin, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan all do one on Cad Bane to force him to give information up. And really, it's kind of like a dark side power in some ways, because Kylo Ren uses it on Poe Dameron in The Force Awakens, and he uses it in other ways. So like a mind trick is, making someone say or do a certain thing for a short period of time. A mind touch is more of a forcible control, I think, and being able to really invasively get some of this information. But at this point, and from what I can tell, all of the Jedi don't feel this way, that they think that mind tricks and mind touches aren't specifically a dark side power, but I know in the Star Wars community it's quite a hotly debated topic. But yeah, basically Sskeer tells Keeve to do that to him, and because he's connected to the Drengir, then it should tell all the Drengir that the meat is then rotten, which will stop them eating everyone. So Keeve does this, and it seems to succeed. So the Drengir then start to back up on Sedri Minor and on Starlight, and assumedly around the galaxy as well. They think that all of this meat is rotten, and they can't eat it, so they kind of just try and slink away. And then the final panels of this comic shows that Avar thinks that Sskeer can be restored after his fall to the dark side and being consumed by the Drengir. And the final panel shows that he is now lying with his eyes rolled back, seemingly lifeless, in Keeve's arms. And the last thing that Keeve says of this comic run/volume is, "Don't you dare." And that is where this ends. So obviously she's holding Sskeer there, worried that he is going to die. And I guess you guys will find that out next month when I tackle issue number 6 and onwards. But my friends, that is the end of this comic specifically, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my various connections to the other High Republic content and things, and gave enough background information that if you haven't read these comics or any High Republic stuff before, that it'll kind of pique your interest. The High Republic era is really interesting. The Light of the Jedi book and the Rising Storm book are absolutely incredible to read. They're so good. I can't wait to get Fallen Star and start reading that as well. But I do really recommend those, and obviously recommend checking out my book reviews as well, which, as I say, the first part of them are all spoiler-free, and then I give loads of warnings before I delve into slightly more spoiler territory, and then even more warnings afterwards when I delve into the even more so spoiler territory and give some of the plot details away. But yeah, that's generally the end of the episode, apart from some other stuff of what I'm involved with. So in brief, what have we got coming up? So next week is going to be the first volume of the Poe Dameron comics by Charles Soule. They're set before The Force Awakens, and I've not actually read those yet, so I'm quite excited to dive into those. The week after that is going to be the first volume of the High Republic Adventures comics. They're written by Daniel Jose Older, and they are not on Marvel Unlimited because they're not published by Marvel. They're published by IDW Printing. So it's quite exciting to get through those, because I've read those and they are excellent. They're as good as these comics are, and in certain ways are actually better in certain parts, but I'm going to get into that in that episode. And then the week after that, I'll be tackling another mini-series, I think. I'm currently waiting for Monster of Temple Peak to be delivered to me because my comic provider has not actually sent me issues 3 or 4, and they were meant to be delivered in like September, I think, or October, or at least that's when the order was placed. So I've put in a question to them to find out why I haven't received these 2 comics, but we'll see, because I might end up getting the finale of Trail of Shadows before Monster of Temple Peak. So if that's the case, I'll tackle that, but we'll kind of cross that bridge when we come to it. I do also have another mini-series, which is the IDW IDW Clone Wars Battle Tales, which I haven't read yet, and I've also got 2 more volumes of the Vader's Castle horror story anthology series as well, which is once again by Cavan Scott. So everything seems to be High Republic stuff and or Cavan Scott at the moment. So that's what you can kind of expect over the next month. I am aiming to do the next book review soon, which will be Race to Crashpoint Tower, which takes place at the same time as The Rising Storm, with a new Jedi padawan called Ram Joram. He's very good with machines. He's a really interesting character. He's probably my favourite part of the book. So I'll be tackling that at some point soon, and then I'll do Out of the Shadows, and then after that I will do Fallen Star, but obviously it just takes a lot longer to record the book reviews and stuff, because of all the sheer amount of information in like a, 1 to 300 page book. But that's what you can expect from this channel specifically going forward. I've also got a Patreon and my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat. So Genuine Chit-Chat, I speak to a different person every episode. I've had members of Comics in Motion on. I've had members of the extended family, like Scott of the 20th Century Geek and things, and lots of other individuals involved in nerdy stuff. But I've also had conversations with people not about nerdy things. I've also spoken to Claudia Gray, who obviously is one of the High Republic authors. I've also spoken to Paolo Villanelli, who's a comic book artist who does the Star Wars Bounty Hunter comics. I've spoken to Alex and Molly Damon of Star Wars Explained, which is a massive Star Wars YouTube channel. I spoke to Dominic Pace of The Mandalorian. He was in episodes 1 and 3 of series 1 of The Mandalorian. So I've spoken to lots of different people about a variety of things, and I've also spoken to people who've got nothing to do with Star Wars or nerdy stuff. I've spoken to other authors, I've spoken to actors, I've spoken to psychologists, I've spoken to people about culture, travelers, all kinds of different things. But if you are listening on YouTube, you can check out the playlists where I put all of the Star Wars stuff and also all of the Genuine Chit-Chat stuff into playlists and things. And if you could go over to my YouTube channel, which a link is in the description for that, or if you're already on there, thank you, please subscribe, because once I get to 100 subscribers I can change the channel link name, and I know that almost no one listens on YouTube, but I do have a lot of video versions of episodes on YouTube, not of the Star Wars Comics and Canon ones, but more of the interview style shows I do as well. In addition to that, you can also listen on YouTube or on the feed of Comics in Motion for the weekly Book of Boba Fett discussion that we're doing. So I'm having different guests on each time, so it's like a rolling roster in a way. I'm trying to have a variety of people communicating and interacting with a variety of different people. Some are YouTubers, some are podcasters, and we've obviously done episode 3. We generally record on Thursdays, and then I try and release the episode for the Friday, so you should already be able to see this where you're listening to that. Some of them have got videos, some of them don't. Not every person involved wants to be recorded video, which is perfectly fine for me, so just take a look around. I've got a playlist specifically on the Genuine Chit-Chat YouTube channel, which is video conversations, so I think it's called Conversations with Video. So if you want to see what some of my guests look like in a moving fashion, then you can check that out as well. In addition to that, guys, if you're listening on Spotify, please give Comics in Motion a 5-star review. You don't even need to review, you just give it a rating. So you don't even need to type anything at all. You just click like 3 buttons and it is done. In addition to that, you can review on Good Pods. You can review on Apple Podcasts. You can review on Podcast Addicts. There's basically almost anywhere you can listen to podcasts. You can leave a rating, a comment, or a review of some sort. And I would really appreciate you guys doing a review of this show, as well as on Genuine Chit-Chat. That would help a huge amount. But if you don't want to do that, you can obviously share on social media and those sort of things. But if you don't want to do that, you can support the show financially. So you can go over to patreon.com/genuinechitchat, and for as little as £1 a month, you will get hours of additional content from myself and Megan reviewing certain Star Wars stuff and nerdy things, MCU stuff, but also Harry Potter, but also non-nerdy stuff. We've got a lot of film reviews due to be recorded soon. Megan's just been a bit ill this week, so I haven't had a chance to record those with her. I've also done a couple of Star Wars book reviews on there that are not being released on this channel. So I've already done one for The Dark Disciple, and I've also got one recorded for the Legends book, Shatterpoint, featuring Mace Windu during the Clone Wars. So both of them are very interesting. Currently listening to Last Shot, which is all about Han Solo and Lando, both before A New Hope, but also after Return of the Jedi. So that's by Daniel Jose Older as well, who's the one who's a High Republic author too. So you can listen to all of those things, and it supports the show, which means the absolute world to me. It's as little as £1 a month. You get hours of additional content. You get to support the show, and the slightly higher tiers also get some bonuses as well. Like I release guest lists occasionally on there. I also post photos of the Star Wars comics that I tackle on this show. Normally I post them on social media after a few days of this being released, but over on Patreon I normally put the photos up a few days beforehand. So if you want to support the show financially and you want loads of additional content, like hours and hours and hours of additional content and things, then please consider checking out my Patreon. Aside from that, guys, I'll just remind you, please check out my Star Wars High Republic book reviews. They are in playlists on YouTube, or you can just type in Comics in Motion book review High Republic and it will come up. But that's going to be it for me, guys, really, I think, at this time. I'm very excited to get back in the swing of things of podcasting, both for this show and for genuine chit-chat. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I will speak to you guys next week with the first volume of the Poe Dameron comics. And as always, guys, thank you so much for listening, and may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics in Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics in Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.